Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again this afternoon. My name is Shirot Alwen. I'm Associate Professor and Director of the MBA and Executive MBA programs at the AUC School of Business. This here is session 3 in our Masterclass series, where we invite our international faculty from our network and partners to share their management expertise, insights, and reflections on the current situation. Our highly ranked Executive MBA, EMBA, is offered by the Triple Crown accredited AUC School of Business, and only 1% of business schools have that ranking, actually. The EMBA is offered for many years now, and it caters to the needs of the executives, management executives in Egypt and the region, both in terms of content, of course, and, the materials, the topics we offer, and also the way we offer them. So delivery focuses on hands-on application, real-life business cases. The modules are offered once per month in a compressed manner to meet the schedule of, the busy schedules of our executives. And we stay in close contact with our alumni. Some of them, have signed up to join us today, and really excited to see your comments. This is part of our long life learning experience we offer to our students and our MBA alumni. And we're here hoping that, by this, we're here to help them through these challenging times we're all facing together and making the right decisions. So allow me please to proudly introduce Joe Pons, President of Eximia Marketing Consultants, previously also Marketing Professor at IESE, International Graduate School of Management, Spain. Joe, lovely to meet you again.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sharawat. Good afternoon, dear friends. I'm talking to you from quite far away. My home is in a city in the south of Spain called Malaga, right across the Mediterranean and the African coast. And I'm talking to you from a country that has suffered tremendously over the last few months and is still suffering. According to some accounts, up to 50,000 people have died because of COVID. The country is totally paralyzed, and my son has just come into the room, as you can see him at the back. And now I'm going to have to try to get some help to remove him from here, because my wife is teleworking in another room in the house. So come here, say hello, say hello, say hello. You say hello to all my friends?
Hello there.
Good.
Hello.
And now you can leave. Sorry, this is what happens when you have live programs. It was not planned, I can honestly tell you. And now I'm just going to move him out of the room because I'm not getting any help. Just 1 second.
Please. This has become definitely very normal.
Apologies.
No worries.
Apologies.
No worries, no worries.
You see, now I have some help.
All right.
My apologies. Anyway, let's restart again, but what can we do? So anyway, I was telling you, my country has suffered and is suffering a lot. The economy is basically paralyzed. As you know, my country is similar to Egypt in the sense that tourism is the greatest contributor to GDP. About 15% of the country's GDP comes from tourism. This year's tourism is going to be non-existent. And just that alone is sufficient to make many people worry tremendously about the economic future in the short term of the Spanish economy. We are slowly coming out of lockdown. In fact, today is the first day that shops are open. and bars are open. And as many of you who've been here know, bars are the social center of the country, which means that no bar, no life. And slowly we're coming out of this, but the economic consequences are going to be extremely, extremely serious. Now, so having said that, the topic that I chose in order to just basically have a chat with you as much as we can and keep it as interactive as possible is connected with the marketing and sales challenges that companies are going to have to face as they emerge after COVID still alive. This is a topic that, of course, I am dealing with on a daily basis because of my consulting engagements with clients here in Spain and in many other countries. But the only beautiful thing about this pandemic is that everybody has it. I mean, beautiful, you will excuse my use of the word, but this is the first time in humanity we all face something together, right? You know, it had never happened before. Now, I'm going to try to keep the topic very managerially oriented. In other words, I don't want this to be a theoretical lecture. I'm going to tell you what companies are doing, and I'm going to reflect on what managers will have to do in order to confront this issue and come out of this alive and, if possible, stronger.
Okay.
The first thing I want to tell you is that crisis is opportunity. The bigger the crisis, the bigger the number of opportunities that derive from it. I'm now using, like probably all of you, you are watching me because there is a company called Zoom, which you may be aware of, had 10 million users last December. The last time they counted them, about 2 weeks ago, the number of Zoom users in the world had shot up to 250 million. No matter all the complaints about lack of security and all these other issues that I'm sure you've all read about. In other words, you talk to the owner of Zoom about crisis and see what he tells you. I saw another figure extremely interesting the other day because a friend of mine who is the CEO of the local Coca-Cola bottler for Spain and the south of Europe was telling me what the sales figures for Coca-Cola were up to, I think it was the 20th of April. And the number that he gave me is, he said, we are 1% down. 1% down means stable, which is interesting when people talk about the new post-COVID world and how things are going to be different and so on and so forth. Let's put that in perspective. Because, I mean, depending on what you do, depending on the source of your brand equity, etc., you know, the world is not going to be different. We're going to have a bit of a hiccup, but eventually it will come back to sort of normal. There's a company which is a subsidiary of, I think it's a subsidiary of Alibaba in China called Tencent. Tencent just published last week their latest sales results. Is 30% up on last year. You know, 30% up on last year. The number of people who are subscribing to their pay-per-view TV is approximately 150 million, probably all of them in China. In other words, crisis means opportunity. This topic is very ambitious. And this topic has to start with an understanding of the external challenges that the market situation is posing companies all over the world. Challenge number one is the result of consumers changing their behavior because of the economic crisis and because of the social crisis that we are going to be confronted with. People will become more price sensitive. People will probably become more brand sensitive because whenever consumers face a higher perceived risk, they turn to choose the well-known trusted brands that they always bought. Maybe this is one of the reasons why Coca-Cola is stable in terms of sales and with only -1% in a year where consumption could be all over the place. Another marketing-related consequence of economic crisis, at least of all the previous economic crises that excuse me, that the West had to confront, is the growth of private labels. Private labels are labels that are owned by retailers rather than by manufacturers. Private labels have increased tremendously in every single economic recession all over Europe and even in the US. And what is interesting is that at the end of the recession, the market share of private labels has never gone back to what it was before. In other words, it has stayed higher. The implications of that in a developing country like Egypt mean higher power and higher negotiating leverage for the large ticket retailers who will see their market muscle develop even more strongly. Now, the third implication from a marketing point of view is that you and I will keep social distancing for a long time, and that's going to include social distancing in the way we purchase. And social distancing in purchasing means online. The safest way to buy something with keeping social distance is by buying it online. And many things we never expected to consume online are going to be consumed, and many orders are going to be made in categories where we thought online would make inroads a lot slower and a lot later. And I'm not talking only B2C, I'm talking mostly B2B. I'm talking about the way many companies are going to, fine-tune and materialize and implement their new purchasing needs. Now, all of the above, all that I just mentioned is one more tsunami that the world has never seen in such a big dimension happening all over the place at the same time. The implications for companies when it comes to, and I'm addressing people who are leading or trying to lead the sales and marketing function in their organizations. And I'm addressing to the challenges that they are facing specifically at this point in time. And, the challenges have to do with managing sales and marketing as two distinct entities under the same umbrella, realizing that the two of them need to be much better in tune with each other, because in the new post-COVID world, it's not going to be so clear where marketing finishes and sales starts. The difference between both is going to be fuzzier. Things that marketing used to do will now going to become part of the sales job, and many things that salespeople used to do are now going to be in the kingdom of the marketing function. To use a very sort of hot and general concept that is in the hands of everybody in the last few years, the famous funnel that follows the customer journey and the way marketing and sales interact in order to follow that funnel is going to be extremely different. I mean, just to mention a very quick question, you know, a salesperson, what is a salesperson for? What was a salesperson for? And what is the role of the salesperson going to be in 6 months' time? Do you see any difference? You better. And at the same time, salespeople are going to be required, as long as they perform certain function that cannot be performed more effectively using other means. And in that sense, you know, we need to see, what does a salesperson do? You know, a salesperson, and if I'm allowed, I will just share, you know, a PowerPoint presentation. Am I sharing my screen right now, Charlotte?
No, keep on. I mean,
I'm not sharing my screen. Then just a
share
second.
the PowerPoint. Share the PowerPoint as we.
Excuse me. I'm just going to share a PowerPoint presentation, just little by little.
Very nice.
Am I sharing it now?
Yes, now it is. That's perfect. This
Okay.
is it.
Now, here you see, I mean, this is not very hot. This is not a discovery from COVID times. I mean, this is just what salespeople have existed for. A salesperson is in the company, and we pay the salesperson because, number one, they generate leads. Number two, they turn those leads into sales, and therefore they fill the top line of my income statement. They provide ongoing customer service to customers that are becoming not an object of transaction, but a relationship. And therefore, they help me retain and develop customer relationships. And last, but definitely not least, they collect and bring market information in the way that will help me, you know, decide action plans, know what the competition is doing, what changes in price are taking place in the marketplace, and so on and so forth. So now, when you look at this slide, you say, hey, do I still need salespeople? Quite frankly, you know, everybody needs salespeople. I know many companies that used to have only online sales that are now having a lot of headaches, thinking how they're going to build a real flash-based field sales force, because they realize that at some point in time, some of these tasks that you see in the slide are not equally performed by, you know, online activities, and not even, but something that many companies used to have, which is just what they call inside sales forces. Sales forces that never saw the eyes of the customer physically, and that only operated using basically the digital resources and the chat possibilities that the company had. Let's go back to real life. Now, salespeople are needed, but salespeople are needed alongside a marketing function that is definitely changing the scope and changing the activities. I used to think, once upon a time, I used to have two paradigms, and I'm questioning whether these paradigms are still valid, which related to the sales and marketing interaction. The first paradigm was the one that sort of told me that marketing existed in order to facilitate the job of the sales force. Marketing is whatever a company does that will make it easier for my salespeople to sell more, to sell better, and if possible, to sell at a higher price, right? This is a question that is still, very much live and timely in many organizations. What is the role of the marketing function? The second paradigm is that for many years, I never hired anybody for a marketing position in the organizations where I worked, unless that person had at least 2 years of real sales experience. I decided on that after making lots of mistakes in lots of companies. And all of a sudden, I saw that, perhaps we could go that way. Now, I'm slowly and not so slowly this week's rethinking these paradigms and thinking to what extent the role of marketing is only to make sure that sales sells more, sells better, and sells more expensive, and particularly to what extent we should require people on the marketing side of the business to have had direct sales experience. I'm reconsidering it. Because I see, and you probably see in your companies, many people in the marketing department with a profile that you never expected people in the marketing department would have. Marketing has become mostly or mainly analytics. And analytics means analytic skills. And it means bringing into your marketing department people who sometimes it looks like they feel more comfortable talking to the screens of their laptops rather than to looking into the eyes of a customer to deliver good or particularly not so good news. Now, I happen to believe quite firmly that the quality with which you coordinate marketing and sales is one of the keys to success in the new post-COVID environment, where marketing adds value to sales and sales needs the marketing input and is waiting for the marketing input in order to sell more, sell better, and sell more expensive. The quality of coordination between these two functions, as I said, is going to contribute even more to the competitive advantage of your business. And marketing needs to learn to turn big data into deeper customer insights. Everybody talks about big data these days, right? Probably not too many people talk about small data. People talk about big data, and big data is only useful to you as long as you can turn it into deeper, actionable customer insights on the basis of which you can design marketing plan and you can design a sales strategy to support and implement that marketing plan. Now, let's move on to a couple more internal challenges that the new post-COVID environment is going to confront managers with. In many cases, some companies are going to restart fresh after a period of lockdown, metaphoric or even physical, curfew, zero sales. You're going to have to restart again. Restarting is an opportunity in many cases because it allows you to show how much you have learned from previous mistakes. And this is an opportunity you're not going to have, hopefully, for a very long time. We are given a fresh start, an opportunity to contact again that potential customer who said no to us 2 years ago and said no again to us last year. And it's an opportunity to go back to that person, to give him a fresh new value proposition to which he cannot say no, because we know the reasons why he refused to buy from us last year, and we've done our best to modify the value proposition and to create value and to create a point of difference, which is as valid today as it was in the pre-COVID environment. And that new value proposition is going to give me access to that customer who had refused working for me once, twice, or 3 times. This is an opportunity that is going to present itself, for which I am sure many of you are already preparing for. It's time to reestablish your credibility. It's time to prove again that your brand is not based on artificial cosmetic values and benefits, but on real ones that will deliver extra benefit to the customer. Third implication, when a market is growing 25% per year, when my customers are more stupid than me and have worse finance, and when the customers do not really know what they buy, my son, the little guy that you saw walking around here, could be the CEO. If, the company would sail nicely. But when the going gets tough, when the market stops growing, when the competition is just as intelligent and as desperate to survive as you are, and when the consumers know exactly what to buy, when to buy, and at what price to buy, at that point, my friends, the quality of management makes it or breaks it. The big difference in the companies that will survive from the companies that will not survive is the quality of the leadership behind the decisions and the choices that are made, and the realization that marketing is not about creating cosmetics, is not about some face-lifting effort that will make me look more attractive. Marketing is about designing and delivering real value to real customers, for which the effort, the contribution, and the team play of the sales force is even more required than it was. One last challenge before we open up to questions. In every recession, companies have gone crazy about going lean. Everybody wants to be leaner. Everybody wants to be fitter when the time comes and the economy picks up again. This is all fine. I'm just going to send you a warning signal. Be careful not to go so lean that you develop eating disorders. When people stop eating and they go on a diet for too long a period of time, there is something called anorexia, which causes serious damage to the organism, because then when the times pick up again, that body will not be able to jump back with the speed, with the energy, and with the enthusiasm that the market will require to. So granted, it's easy to say, granted, these are tough times. Be very careful pruning from the tree of your company the sensors that will signal the signs that the market is becoming alive again. You will pay a huge price for that, my friends. I have shared some thoughts in not a very organized, structured fashion. If you are still there, I have to tell you, you're very patient. And now let's open it up to questions, no matter how precise, no matter how practical. And if I say questions, I say complaints or disagreements that can create some interaction going among us. Thank you, my friends.
Thank you.
So what?
Yeah, thank you, Joe. It's been a pleasure. I was just listening to, raising very, very, exciting issues. I have to say, you do make it exciting in a certain way, and talking about the whole difference between marketing and sales and how that fine line might be overlapping in the future or not, and how to move forward. So we're receiving some questions. In the meantime, what exactly is the profile of the salesperson? What kind of combination of skills does he need to function in these times?
Right. Well, I'm sure all of you have read these books talking about the hunters and the farmers, right? And so there's lots of studies in psychology and in research in many business schools about the profile of hunting salespeople, and those are the people that you need to have in your sales force in order to develop and acquire new customers, more aggressive, more short-term focused, more materialistic in the incentive systems that they search. And then there's another tribe, and this is the tribe of the farmers. The guys who are probably more quiet, don't make so much noise, but they take a customer that has been acquired and they develop that relationship and they start cross-selling and they start creating intimacy and they start turning that conquest into a real sort of revenue stream. What I need to tell you, my friends, is that you need to have both tribes in your sales team, because the perfect guy who does both has not yet been developed. I mean, the 50-50 guy, the guy who can be a hunter on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and a farmer on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays doesn't exist. And if he does, it's probably tremendously expensive. Therefore, you need to have both, but you need to make sure that your management system for those people helps hunters develop farming skills and helps farmers become hungry for hunting every once in a while. And this is something that can be achieved with the right motivational tools, with the right compensation system, and with the right structuring and the way you deploy the salespeople. For example, if you reward salespeople just on the basis of sales volume, they will not be so moved to conquer new doors than if you compensate them on the number of people that they sell to. The choices you make in the compensation system helps them develop new skills. And right now, as I say, you need hunters who can farm, and you need farmers who can be hungry enough to start hunting. Does that make sense, Sarah?
Beautiful, makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And using the analogies again makes it very clear. We have a question here from Bishoy Sabri. He's asking again, how can the company's marketing team show the real values of the company during these tough times? Like the whole, I guess, every culture has, and he has a follow-up question on that point. If you can actually point to the essential and non-essential businesses while answering that, like maybe the core versus the non-essential.
That's right. Let me start with an example. There is a famous, probably the most famous Spanish company is Zara. I mean, many of you will buy or are buying clothing from Zara. When the crisis started, of course, Zara had to close their shops worldwide. And they said that they were not going to fire any employees, which is very easy to say. But if you consider the cost of the salaries for an organization like Sarah, I don't even know how many shops they have. Now, some people said, oh, this is a cheap marketing trick. And you can get away with that until you start counting the cost of that investment. And how much that action is costing the company and what it tells consumers about the values of the brand. I mean, this is time to show the best in you. Because if you don't show the best in you, you will show the opposite. And no matter which one you show, customers are going to remember. And customers are going to have good memories of what you did for them. And if they happen to forget, don't worry, because a few competitors will take care of reminding them very quickly.
Very nice, thank you. So this whole dissection between sales and marketing, I mean, you even had a slide on the roles.
Yes.
For me, it used to be easy. I would see, like, again, marketing generates demand and sales closes the deal or something like that.
Right.
But there's many definitions, but we know that it doesn't work across all industries and maybe B2C versus B2B. And this whole redefinition of business models, how does this translate into, you know, will we see a bigger gap or a smaller gap?
Now, I mean, I think we will see creative ways through which companies learn to administer the resources in sales and marketing that very often are wasted because of the lack of coordination that happens between them. You know, there is one company, I'm going to use this company as an example, you know, but it's just because I know them very well and I know that they're actually proud of this. It's a multinational that you probably know called Henkel, you know, based in Germany and operating in detergents, in perfumes, and in adhesives. In Henkel, for a long time, I mean, this is not today's invention, people switch between marketing and sales positions. Their careers happen 2 years on one side and then 1 year in the other, 1 year in the other, and 2 years in the other side, which means that basically whenever they are trying to coordinate with their colleague, they remember that, you know, this is going to be themselves 2 years down the road. Coordinating is difficult unless you make it easier. And the role of the CEO, the role of the leader, is to create an environment where people on both sides are going to want to work together. I don't know any salespeople who refuses the help of marketing if the help of marketing helps them sell. They will refuse the help of marketing when it's just about filling in forms, when it's just about controlling in a sort of a police kind of way the activities that they perform. And at the same time, I don't know any marketing department that doesn't appreciate help which comes in the way of timely and insightful customer insights from the people who are really in touch with the customers. So the incentive system is another way of bringing people together. I would encourage many of you in your companies to make sure marketing goes on joint visits to key accounts with the salespeople who are responsible, and that you bring some of your key salespeople into the marketing meetings where brand strategy is decided or fine-tuned.
Thank you. Very helpful. And I love how really you have very actionable steps in your recommendations. That's
well, this is practical because this is mostly the result of my consulting practice. It's not so much a result of conceptual developments out of textbooks, you know, but mostly are things that I have implemented in some organizations.
Lovely. So in your consulting, have you focusing on, for example, I have a question on for financial consulting firms to reach to SMEs. We know that SMEs are suffering, right? And it's so we have financial consulting firms wanting to reach out to them. Do you have any tips in the best channels to reach those SMEs as a financial consultant?
The shorter, the better. The shorter the channel that you use, the better and the most effective. In other words, if you can look at the SME in the eye, don't call them. And if you can call them, don't send an email. The shorter the channel, the more effective the commercial, the value proposition is going to be placed. It's true. I mean, in fact, many companies in financial services, and I'm referring this to my own country because of very recent experiences. For many companies in the financial services, these weeks and these months are an opportunity to present their better face after many years in which their image has suffered tremendously as a result of the previous financial crisis, when they were perceived as being the dirty capitalists that took advantage of the situation because they were too big to fail. So right now, they can show that they care, you know, and my friends, it's extremely important if an SME feels that I care, knowing that they have some evidence on the basis of which they know that we care, that we have proven it to them. You know, a phone call, a visit, you know, something that is zero-based. Let's start from scratch. This is sort of the second opportunity approach that I mentioned before. Customers are going to give us an opportunity and we can use it well or we can waste it. And if we waste it, we deserve to pay the price that is going to come to the table.
Okay. As a follow-up, again, the size of the SME, does it factor in, because you mentioned the phone, the channel, how do they reach the databases of these? And how do you, I mean, it's nice if you have some kind of way to begin, but is there any kind of particular approach for SMEs, database they should look into, or?
Well, I mean, I guess the word SME is sometimes too generic. You know, within SMEs, you can segment, and you can segment the segmentation, and you can decide, you know, which is the top 2% of those SMEs that I would really like to focus on because of the value that they will provide, or because of the potential value that that relationship, or because it's going to give me access to industries where I desperately need to improve my competitive standing. And then, you know, if you value that relationship more, you're going to use more expensive channels. If the relationship is valid, but not to the same extent, then you're going to be looking for efficiency more than for effectiveness.
I see. Lovely. Perfect answer. That was from Ashraf Mustafa. Thank you, Ashraf, for the question. We have another question from Hassan Hashim. He is asking, do you think we should radically change our strategy from now, or is it better to deal with it day by day? I mean, you did discuss the lean and the eating disorders. That was a very nice analogy, but he goes on to say, should we deal with it as a silent risk, a black swan, or is it just a passing crisis?
Well, I like to usually make a point in the companies where I'm on the board, etc., that we should have a protocol for emergency situations. And a protocol should be there because in emergency situations, there is a tendency to panic. And when you panic, you should not make important decisions. I mean, there's lots of classical authors that have said that, you know, at times of huge storm, you know, it's better to calm down. You know, don't get infected by the virus, because that virus could take you to make rushed choices. You know, stay calm, stay put, reflect on things. I mean, don't change what is not giving you huge trouble. Having said that, if your market is changing, if your customers are modifying their customer behavior, if your competitors are developing new and improved value propositions, you better shape up and you better look for, a nicer shirt to present to them as quickly as possible, else you're going to be left in an offside situation where no play is going to be allowed. Many of you, well, most of us, will come out of this, including business schools. Sure, what?
Yeah.
we will come out of this mess with renewed strategic insights, with renewed focus, with renewed priorities, and the process, the quality of the process that will take us to this renewed decision making is related to what I was telling you before, the quality of management. The quality with which decisions are made is, a million times more important now than it ever was.
Definitely. I mean, so I guess in reflecting to what's happening externally in terms of your competition and what's happening, you should update extensively your strategy right now, but very, very, very head-on comments. Thank you, Joe. I have another very interesting, I think a lot of people would enjoy this question. Midhat Swalam, he says that, how do you see the future of what we call face-to-face selling in COVID-19? Because, and what's your recommendation in an industry that depends very heavily on this to begin with?
Right. Midhat, I mean, this is the mother of all questions.
Yeah.
This is, for many companies, this is the mother of all questions. I mean, I think there is something in face-to-face that is not exactly what you feel right now when you're looking at the screen of your computer. There is something else beyond that that contributes to developing certain feelings, trust, confidence, insight, you name it. What is clear is that many customers are going to spend more limited time face-to-face, and therefore the quality and the value that we create during that time has to be much more carefully planned and much more carefully delivered. For many years, huge organizations in the world, the biggest example I can tell you is Walmart, the world's biggest retailer, for many years doesn't want to talk to salespeople from their suppliers. They say to them, you want to sell to Walmart? You go on the website, you see the requirements that we have, and you make a value proposition explicit through email. You send me your video to accompany that value proposition. I will watch, I will analyze, I will study, and if it convinces me, I will contact you. Right? So face-to-face, yes. Face-to-face important, yes. Face-to-face, a lot more limited, and therefore a lot more risky. Gone is the time when you send people just to see what he could get away with. Gone is the time when some organizations were sending their salespeople and they were telling them, don't call ahead the customer, because if you do, the customer will not want to see you because you're bringing exactly what you were bringing 2 months ago. And for many years, we have been able to get away with that. And that is going to become a very precious commodity, which means, practical purposes, training of your salespeople, selection of your salespeople, key performance indicator of your salespeople, and compensation system and evaluation of your salespeople are all going to be more crucial activities.
Actually, that was exactly the question we have from a Mustafa Al-Gindi. He was saying, what is the impact of the new sales strategies on the training, right, from a development plan for your salespeople? So you're seriously advising them to, can we repeat those 4 points again? Revisiting the KPIs, training
Right.
the compensation.
Let's see if I remember.
Let's see.
I think I talked about hiring, selecting them. I talked about training. I talked about selecting KPIs, in other words, setting performance indicators that are crucial in the new sales task that they have to perform. And I talked about designing the compensation system that will help and not hinder the implementation of those key performance indicators. Okay. What was the question that you were referring to?
That was one. He was asking, what do we do in terms of, the new sales strategies that you suggest in order to train and teach and do development plans for the current.
Right.
In this time, you want to change. What I think is happening is that hire story, but you want to deal with your current sales force, right? You don't want to keep everyone's worried about their jobs. So I'm thinking, what can you do in terms of training to realign them to the new methods? You don't want to let go, if they're true to traditional or used to face-to-face, what do you do honestly?
That's right. That's right. Let me share one more slide.
Okay, that's perfect.
Let me share one more slide, which I think is connected with, this is the one. If I look at this slide, this is a very simple framework, and I like this framework because it's simple, and I only appreciate frameworks that I can understand. And this is the simplicity that I understand. When you think about sales strategies, my advice is to start at the end. And the end means, what is it that you hope to achieve in the new sales environment? And to define that operationally, not financially. I want to achieve cross-selling. I want to upsell. I want to increase the number of customers. I want to, to reach a level of penetration that I did not have. What is the final outcome? This is phase one of any redefinement of the sales strategy. Step two is to go one step back and say, well, which behavior from the salespeople is more likely to deliver the desired outcome that I just decided? And that sales outcome, that behavior from the salespeople can then be mapped to the three basic levers with which I manage salespeople. How am I going to organize them? How am I going to structure them? Am I going to structure the salespeople geographically, by product, by customer? This is the choice. Second, how am I going to make sure that they have the skills that are needed in the new game? Do I need people who talk a lot, or do I need people who listen a lot? Usually, the people who talk a lot cannot listen very well, and the opposite. And third, how do I make up the package of compensation so as to facilitate that the compensation is a help in moving people in the right direction? Let me give you one example. A few years ago, I was approached by the president of an engineering company, quite large, operating in 25 countries. And he told me in a very humble way, something that I did not expect. He said, Joe, let me confess something that I am confused with. He said, I have a compensation system with my salespeople. And lately I have come to, I have some doubts as to whether the compensation system is a help or an obstacle in implementing the marketing strategy that I have. And he said, can you help me? It's interesting to pose the question in that way. How many CEOs would have the courage to pose questions that way? I don't even know whether my compensation system is a help or an obstacle in implementing the strategy. And then I said to him, well, let's think together for a little while. And I said, how old is the compensation system? And he said to me, 8 years. I said, well, that doesn't mean anything because, it's not about age, it's about quality. And then I said, in those 8 years, how many times have you modified the strategic objective or the strategic priorities of your organization? And then he thought for a little while and he said, on average, twice per year. And then said, well, so therefore we have two beings that started life together, and one has moved 16 times while the other one stayed in the same place. After 16 jumps, what is the probability that they will both be aligned? 0. 0, right? So this is why those three issues that you see on the left-hand side of this slide, the way we structure the sales force, the way we build the right skills in them, and the way we design a compensation package are going to be crucial in completing the sales process, which starts with the outcomes and continues with the processes.
Very nice. So alignment, I guess, between, very nicely explained, I have to say, between both. We have time for one last question, and it does take us to another turn that might have been even relevant before COVID. Social media campaigns and budgets. This is something we in the executive MBA, we struggle with. How much do we go with? Is it worth it, or is it worth to put our money somewhere else? So please.
Oof. This is a very general question because the answer is not general, I'm afraid. I cannot give you an aspirin which is you can take in many different possibilities and it doesn't really solve any problem. I can tell you that probably your social media budget is going to be higher this year than it was last year, and that your social media budget is likely to be higher next year. Having said that, I have to tell you that the most important part of setting the marketing budget is where you clarify the objectives that you want to achieve with that marketing budget. If your objectives are not clear, if you don't know well and operationally the reaction you want to generate in your target market, I don't care where you spend your budget because you will never know whether you achieved it or not.
So, the question is from Farid Haddad, but I'm echoing the question myself because, so you have to have a starting point and then it's trial and error, or do we copy from competition and we look what other similar industry people do? Is that information, is there a go-to place where I can find out about budgets for something like that for a similar competitor or something like that?
I'm not sure whether you in your local reality have access to that. My access to that is very, let's say, of dubious value, because one thing is the budget that is declared officially, and then is that you go to the discount that you get, at some point in time, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's really risky. Having said that, it's essential to look at what your competitors are doing, and it's even more important to try and find out what is the result that your competitors achieve with what they spend. Not only the action, but hopefully the outcome.
Okay, and do you think, again, given the COVID situation we're in right now, this will be more reliable source of, reach because of everyone's under,
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is no question that people are going to social media more and more often, and that the number of hours every day that social media is part of my life has increased tremendously in the last 3 months. And I'm not going to go back to what it was before COVID. I mean,
Yeah.
I will retain some habit of using social media in my everyday life for many things that I was not using social media for.
Yes, and you mentioned that in the example, how some patterns might continue with us after this crisis is over, and we should keep an eye on those patterns.
Absolutely. I
That's an
mentioned that when I was referring to private labels, but that's
Yes.
a very different thing, but the same pattern holds.
Yes, yes, I was referring to the same example. It was one of your early things. That the time flied with you, Joe. I mean, we're running out of time, and there are still some questions we didn't take, but we'll send them to you maybe. But thank you very, very much. It's been
Thank you to those people
you.
who lasted for I don't know how long.
No.
It's been a pleasure. Sherwood has my data and my access, and feel free to write with questions, etc., or do it with Sherwood, and then I'll be happy to answer them in writing as soon as I can.
Thank you. Thank you. That is very of you. Thank you all for your, again, engagement, exciting comments, and encouraging comments, and the questions, of course. Looking forward to the fourth session. I think it's scheduled in about 10 days. And thank you very much for joining the Executive MBA Masterclass series. Bye-bye.
Okay.